Harman.
He's shown he's not listening to the argument that he can't redraw the boundaries, which is his government's proposal, until the problem on the register is sorted out. He's shown he's not listening to argument, he's pressing on regardless, and that is not new politics, it's downright unfair. Can I move to another issue? Mr. Speaker, can I move to another issue?
Order. Quite a bad example is being set by some senior members to newcomers. There are far too many... Order. There are far too many private conversations taking place. The public's not impressed. The public want to hear orderly exchanges. Harriet Harman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before the election, the coalition parties talked about ending what they called the surveillance society. The coalition agreement said the government will further regulate the use of CCTV, but on Monday, the Home Secretary couldn't tell the House what this would mean in practice. Can the Prime Minister tell us now?
Well, the first thing, I'm not surprised the Honourable Lady wanted to move on to another subject. Let me just make one last point on the previous question. Yes, well, I'm sorry if it's painful, but it is important. You know, the Right Honourable Lady says it's not right to redraw boundaries until you've sorted out the electoral register. I have to point out, we fought the last election on redrawn boundaries. So I think we've got a long way to go on that one, and there was just the, I have to say, whiff of special pleading. On the issue of surveillance, let me be clear, I support closed-circuit television cameras. I have them in my constituency. They're very effective. When I worked at the Home Office many years ago, I championed those schemes. But I think everyone understands that the level of surveillance has got very great in our country. And as well as the issue of CCTV, there's also the issue of how many different sorts of officials are allowed to enter your house without permission. And we will be bringing forward legislation to deal with this issue. I know that the Labour Party has given up on civil liberties. It is... They're making a... And also, she used to be head of the... the National Council of Civil Liberties. Those are all a long time ago. But on this side of the House, we think civil liberties are important.
Harriet Harman.
Well, can I ask him again? Because I wasn't asking him about people entering people's houses. I was asking him about CCTV. And can I tell him what Theresa was saying to me on Friday? And that it's not the Home Secretary, but Theresa from the Poets' Corner estate in my constituency. Because that Theresa. That's the one that knows about living on an estate that needs CCTV. And let me tell him, they don't want to be told by this government that it's going to be made harder to get the CCTV they need on their estate. Can I press him on this? This is about people feeling and being safe in their communities. Will he guarantee that he will not do anything to make it harder to get or to use CCTV?
I think the Right Honourable Lady should understand this is all about proportionality, making sure we have a system that helps protect people, but also respects civil liberties. I have to say, it is extraordinary how the party opposite is becoming more and more authoritarian. I mean, to hear the Right Honourable Member for Morley and Outward talk about immigration, and we've got the new Alf Garnett of British politics. It's one of the biggest U-turns that any of us can remember. For 13 years, not a word about immigration, not a word about our borders, and now they're all in a race. Maybe it's time to move on to another subject, and she can tell us what she thinks about immigration.
Pauline Latham.
Is the Prime Minister aware that Derbyshire Building Society and 12 branches, the head office of Derbyshire Building Society, is being closed in the village of Duffield in my constituency? And can he assure me that the Prime Minister and his government will do all they can to help those constituents who are losing nearly 250 jobs in the area, which is a very small rural area? Would he please assure us that the government will do all they can to help the constituents who are being dealt this very cruel blow at this very difficult time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I quite understand why my honourable friend wants to raise this issue. It is desperately sad what has happened to the Derbyshire Building Society. Obviously, the government will stand ready to do all it can to retrain people who have lost their jobs and to make sure that they get the very best opportunity and also to make sure we go on having a strong financial services sector. This is not just, as the Derbyshire Building Society reminds us, this is not just about the City of London. It's about the fact that millions of people in our country work in financial services, providing a good service, and we need to help them.
Richard Burden.
One of the projects that stands to be affected by the decision of the government to put £600 million worth of housing investment on hold is the housing element of the redevelopment of the Longbridge site in my constituency, which is important not just to that area, but to the economic recovery of Birmingham as a whole. Given the fact that that project is supported by the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition that runs Birmingham City Council, will the Prime Minister tell me what priority he will attach to the regenerative effects of housing projects like this?
Well, everyone wants to see regeneration continue in Birmingham, and I pay tribute to the Birmingham City Council, jointly run, I have to say, by Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, to do the very good, continue with the very good work they do. What I would say is we want to see that regeneration continue. The problem with the previous government's housing commitments that they made, particularly on social housing, is they simply weren't funded. And one of the things we have been able to do, and the Secretary of State for Business has been able to do, in making the £6 billion of cuts we have in this year, is actually to plough back some of that money into social housing schemes, which the last government promised but never funded.
Jonathan Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has my right honourable friend had the opportunity overnight to reflect on the candid and forthright remarks of the noble Lord Miners in the other place, in terms of the appalling financial legacy left by the party opposite? Does he share my view that these remarks make it clear that the Office for Budget Responsibility is clearly something that should be supported by both sides of the House? And if there's any regret, is it the fact that Lord Miners said this after rather than before?
Prime Minister.
The former City Minister, Lord Miners, is looking on from the public gallery.
On that performance. I think he's doing, and it's great to welcome my honourable friend back to the House of Commons. I think he is right that Lord Miners, who was hand-picked by the last government to be a Treasury Minister, has absolutely put his finger on the button when he said this: there is nothing progressive about a government who consistently spend more than they can raise in taxation, and certainly nothing progressive that endows generations to come with the liabilities incurred by the current generation. Those words are absolutely right. What a pity he didn't say it when he was in office and had the chance to do something about it.
Bridget Phillipson.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for writing to me today to tell me that the decision on the Nissan grant will be fast-tracked. Waiting for this decision is causing huge economic uncertainty to the North East economy. I hope that the Prime Minister might be able to help me with a similar cause of concern to my constituents, whether the decision to rebuild Hetton School will go ahead as planned.
Well, first of all, as well as writing the Honourable Lady a letter, I can now go a bit further, which is to confirm that the specific grant she raised last week with respect to Nissan, that money will be going ahead, that investment will be going in. But before everyone opposite jumps to their feet, let me explain what the problem is with some of these grants. Before the last election, Lord Mandelson had a giant chequebook which he went round opening up all over the country, spending tens of billions of pounds. He promised 200 projects, two-thirds of which were conveniently located in Labour marginal seats. Given that so much money was spent, it is only right for a responsible incoming government to review those decisions one by one and make sure the money was well spent. Fortunately for Lord Mandelson, someone else is now getting their chequebook out to pay for his memoirs.
Sajid Javid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order! Opposition backbenchers must calm down. The honourable gentleman is entitled to be heard. Mr Javid.
Speaker, NHS managers in my constituency of Bromsgrove tell me that they are being strangled by the level of bureaucracy. What action will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, take to make sure that hospitals will never again be allowed to put top-down targets before patient care?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend makes an extremely good point. We all know of cases where targets were getting in the way of proper clinical outcomes and clinical care. Too many people have experienced that in the health service, and our view is clear. If there